The Young and the Restless spoilers. Matt Clark had always been the kind of darkness that never truly faded, a shadow that clung to the edges of the Newman family like a stain time could not wash away. And now, fueled by the twisted remnants of his obsession and hatred, he moved through Genoa City with a cold, predatory purpose. His fixation on revenge had grown into a living thing inside him, something that kept him awake through endless nights and pulled him like a magnet toward Noah Newman and the woman who had unexpectedly become part of his rage, Sienna Bacall. As Noah and Sienna settled into the fragile peace of their quiet apartment, believing for the first time in years that they could breathe without fear, Matt lingered nearby, watching with an intensity that bordered on madness. The calm moments they shared, soft laughter, shared routines, gentle touch became fuel for his fury, each sign of their happiness igniting the old wounds festering inside him. He wanted not only to destroy Noah but to obliterate any possibility that a Newman could ever escape the pain he intended to inflict. Inside the apartment, Noah and Sienna reveled in the illusion of safety, the kind of serenity that felt like a promise of a future they had barely dared to imagine. They moved through their evening unaware that each passing second carried them closer to a violence waiting just beyond the door. The air shifted long before they sensed it, the city outside growing unnaturally quiet as if holding its breath. Shadows deepened against the walls, swallowing the golden light of their lamps. And then, without warning, the fragile peace shattered. Matt slipped into the apartment with a fluid, practiced stealth, his eyes scanning the space with the cold calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment again and again in his mind. Every corner of the room reflected a life he despised, a life Noah had rebuilt, a life Matt believed should have never existed. His presence turned the apartment into a trap, the air growing heavy with the inevitability of violence. Sienna was the first to sense something wrong, a shift in the rhythm of the room, a whisper of movement where none should be. When her gaze lifted and locked onto Matt, her face drained of color, her fear instantaneous and visceral. In that moment she understood the avalanche that was about to fall, and though terror clawed at her, her first instinct was not to run but to protect Noah. She tried to warn him, her breath catching in her throat as she reached toward him, but Matt stepped fully into view, the gun already in his hand, his eyes burning with a hatred so consuming it seemed almost supernatural. To Matt, this was the culmination of every grievance he had collected across the years. The wrongs he believed the Newman family had committed against him coalesced into a single point of focus, Noah. His arm extended with a chilling steadiness, the barrel of the gun aimed directly at Noah's heart, and in that instant, time fractured. The emotion on Matt's face was not merely anger, it was annihilation, the desire to erase Noah from existence as a final, permanent blow against everything Victor Newman had built. Noah froze for a fraction of a second, shock blending with the dawning understanding that this was no hollow threat. This was death, aimed straight at him. But before the sound of the gunshot could fully register, Sienna's body moved on instinct and love, propelled by a force far greater than fear. Without hesitation, she threw herself between them, her body becoming the barrier that fate had demanded, and the bullet struck her with brutal finality. The impact echoed through the apartment like the cracking of the world itself. She collapsed into Noah's arms, the force of the shot stealing her breath even as Noah fell to the floor with her, his mind unable to accept what had just happened. Sienna's blood spread across his hands, warm and devastating, a physical manifestation of the sacrifice she had made. Her eyes fluttered, filled with pain but also an undeniable truth. She had chosen him, chosen to save him, even if it meant losing herself. Noah's heart broke in a way he had never imagined possible. Every second that passed felt like a knife twisting deeper into his soul as he held her trembling body, whispering her name in disbelief, desperate to hold her together even as life slipped from her grasp. Sienna's sacrifice illuminated the depth of her love, a love he had only just begun to fully understand, and now it was being ripped away before he could protect it, nurture it, or give it everything it deserved. The distant wail of police sirens seeped into the scene like a cruel reminder of how late salvation had come. The sound jolted Matt Clark into panic, his confidence crumbling as he realized the consequence of what he had done. Instead of finishing what he started, he abandoned the moment in a frenzy, fleeing into the night with the desperation of a hunted animal. His escape left behind a scene of unbearable sorrow. Noah, drenched in grief and blood, cradling the woman who had given her life for him. When the Newman family arrived minutes later, the weight of what they saw struck them with a force that felt almost physical. Sharon's heart splintered at the sight of her son holding Sienna's lifeless form, her maternal instincts battling horror and anguish. Nick's expression twisted with fury and helplessness, and even the hardened, commanding presence of Victor Newman faltered as he took in the devastation. Sienna's sacrifice was engraved instantly into their hearts, a reminder of how quickly love could be shattered and how deeply loss could carve into a family already scarred by tragedy. Noah seemed beyond reach, his grief consuming him, the world narrowing to the stillness of Sienna's body resting against him. In that moment, he felt something inside himself break irrevocably, replaced by a cold clarity that cut through the haze of pain. Sienna had died to protect him, and he could not allow that sacrifice to become merely another tragedy on Matt Clark's long list of crimes. Her death ignited a fire within him, a fierce and unyielding resolve that transformed his grief into a vow. Noah Newman would not simply mourn Sienna, he would avenge her. He would confront Matt Clark, not out of rage alone, but out of love, justice, and the unshakable need to ensure that no one else suffered the same fate. The darkness that had stolen Sienna's life would be met head-on, and Noah would become the force that ended Matt Clark's reign of terror once and for all. The tragedy had reshaped him, reforged him, and as he stood beneath the flashing police lights, Sienna's sacrifice became the heartbeat of a new purpose, to protect those he loved, and to make certain that Matt Clark paid the ultimate price for the devastation he had unleashed. The hours following Sienna Bacall's death unfolded like a twisted blur in Noah Newman's mind, a sequence of fragmented sensations that refused to settle into a coherent memory. As if his mind was rejecting the reality of what had happened, the world around him seemed stripped of color, sound, and warmth, leaving him moving through the aftermath like a ghost tethered to a body too heavy with pain. The paramedics' arrival, Sharon's trembling hands, Nick's raw fury, Victor's cold, calculating stillness, none of it registered fully. Because every part of Noah remained locked in the moment Sienna fell into his arms, her blood spreading across the floor, her breath slipping away as if carried off by the cruel silence that followed the gunshot. Even as the authorities closed off the crime scene, even as flashing red and blue lights washed over the apartment walls like waves of accusation, Noah could not tear himself away from the image in his mind, Sienna's body arching forward to shield him, her final act born from love so fierce it defied instinct, fear, and reason. That single choice had rewritten Noah's entire existence, leaving him with a hollow ache and a burning fire intertwined so tightly he could barely distinguish between grief and rage. While the police documented evidence and swarmed the hallway in search of any trace of Matt Clark's escape route, Noah stood motionless, arms crossed tightly over his chest as if he could keep himself from falling apart by sheer force. His family surrounded him, but they felt miles away, their voices muted under the roar of the vow forming inside him, a vow that had taken root in the moment Sienna collapsed. A vow that now pulsed through him with frightening clarity. He would not allow her death to become another unsolved tragedy, another scar that the Newman family simply endured until time forced them to forget the layers of pain beneath it. He would become the weapon Matt Clark feared, the reckoning Matt had invited by daring to steal something so precious, so fragile, so replaceable. But the path forward was not simple. The days that followed became a suffocating cycle of police interviews, forensic reports, and a hovering cloud of guilt that wrapped itself around Noah's ribs like a vice. Everywhere he turned, he saw reminders of Sienna, the unfinished mug of tea she had left on the counter, the sweater draped over the back of a chair, the faint trace of her perfume lingering in the apartment despite the chaos that had unfolded. Sharon tried to comfort him, but she was drowning in her own grief, haunted by memories of the losses she had endured before. Nick oscillated between trying to be the grounded parent and struggling with the violent desire to avenge his son. Victor, however, was different. His grief manifested in silence, in the cold intensity of a man who had weathered decades of war and betrayal and now saw this tragedy as a personal assault on his family's legacy. While others mourned, Victor strategized, his mind already constructing scenarios, possibilities, and opportunities to track Matt Clark down and eliminate the threat permanently. But Noah sensed that Victor's methods would prioritize the Newman name, the family's reputation, the efficiency of neutralizing the danger, not the emotional truth of what Sienna had meant to him. And so, Noah began to drift from his family, not out of anger but out of necessity. He needed space to feel the full gravity of Sienna's loss, to let the right transform into something sharper and more powerful. Each night he found himself returning to the apartment, sitting alone in the dark, replaying every moment leading up to the tragedy, analyzing every movement Matt had made, trying to decipher how he had slipped through unnoticed. Noah began piecing together patterns, tracing Matt's past crimes, his alliances, his psychological triggers. He knew Matt's hatred was not random, it was methodical, shaped by years of festering resentment and distorted fixations. And in this obsession, Noah realized Matt might not be finished. Sienna had taken the bullet meant for him, but Matt's original intent had not been fulfilled. This meant the danger remained. The police warned Noah to stay under protection, but the Newman security team stationed outside his door only amplified his sense of helplessness. He didn't want to be protected. He wanted to hunt. He wanted to become the force that stopped Matt from ever hurting another person again. The breaking point came the night Noah visited Sienna's makeshift memorial. Flowers lined the steps outside the apartment building, photos taped to the railing, candles flickering in the cold air. Noah knelt before them, tears stinging his eyes as he read the handwritten notes from neighbors, co-workers, and strangers who had been touched by Sienna's kindness. As he placed his hand over her picture, a thought crystallized inside him. Heavy and undeniable, Sienna had not died because of circumstance or coincidence. She had died because Matt Clark hated him with such ferocity that he was willing to destroy anything or anyone attached to him. If Noah did nothing, Sienna's death would simply mark the beginning of Matt's descent into deeper madness. It was there, kneeling in front of the candles, that Noah finally understood the full weight of his vow. He would not wait for the police. He would not hide under Victor's protection. He would not allow Matt to choose the battlefield again. He would strike first. He would confront Matt himself. And he would end this. Meanwhile, Matt Clark was spiraling. Though he had escaped the apartment without being caught, the reality of what he had done began to unravel inside him like threads snapping under pressure. He replayed the shooting again and again in his mind, but the outcome was wrong. He had intended to kill Noah, to extinguish the life he blamed for his own failures, but instead Sienna had taken the hit. And the emotional impact of that moment began to warp Matt's sense of victory. Instead of triumph, he felt robbed, cheated, denied of the one thing he believed he was owed. His obsession sharpened into delusion. He became convinced that Noah had somehow manipulated Sienna into sacrificing herself, that it was yet another Newman trick designed to make him look unstable. The narrative fed his insanity, pushing him further into the shadows of Genoa City, where he drifted between hideouts, each one more decrepit than the last. But madness could not erase fear. Matt began to realize the police were closing in, and worse, Victor Newman had entered the hunt. Matt knew the brutal efficiency with which Victor handled threats, and for the first time, the predator felt the icy edge of becoming prey. Still, he wasn't finished. Not yet. He wanted Noah to suffer, to feel the same helpless agony that had consumed him for years. The thought twisted itself into a plan, one that grew sharper and more vicious with each passing hour. As Matt prepared to strike again, Noah prepared for a confrontation that would either bring justice to Sienna's memory or cost him everything he had left. The Newman family sensed the storm brewing inside him, but none of them could reach him, not through the grief, not through the resolve that had calcified around his heart like armor. What they didn't know was that Noah was changing, becoming someone shaped not only by loss but by purpose. And with every step he took toward Matt Clark, Genoa City crept closer to another tragedy, another explosion of violence that would shake the foundations of both families. Because Noah understood something no one else did, this was no longer about survival. This was about ending the cycle. Matt Clark had taken Sienna's life. Now Noah was ready to take back control of his own, and in doing so, he would step into a darkness that only love could have driven him toward. A darkness from which he might never emerge the same again.